Ahoy there, my children of the Force. Welcome to Star Wars Transmissions Weekly Q&A. I'm your boy, Dan, and we've got some excellent questions to dive into that I'm very excited to get into with you guys. So let's hop right into it. So for our first question, we're starting off with our homeboy Dooku. So Pieces a Lie 18 asks, do you think Dooku ever reached his full potential as a Sith Lord? I like this question a lot because I don't think so. I'm going to say that I don't think Dooku ever reached his full potential as a Sith. And there's a few reasons why I think that. So although Dooku constantly tried to find and acquire his own apprentice to overthrow Sidious, because remember that Dooku was 100% trying to figure out a way to overthrow Sidious and become the Sith Master, right? That obviously didn't happen. Sidious never allowed that to happen. So our boy was relegated to apprentice status during the entirety of him being a Sith Lord. And with him being a Sith apprentice, I think that mitigated his ability to expand not only his connection to the dark side, but also his strength and that power to the dark side, his overall power, his force power. So in addition to that, forget about the fact that Sidious had, again, no intentions of allowing Dooku to potentially get to the point where he could be strong enough to kill him and then become the Sith Master. He didn't even intend for Dooku to live long enough to become his long-term apprentice, right? His whole plan was, hey, I need a stopgap apprentice until basically Anakin comes of age and I could fully seduce Anakin and make him my eventual Sith apprentice. Because that was Sidious's, once Darth Maul was out of the picture, once Sidious learned of Anakin and his connection to the Force and his strength in the Force, that was Sidious's long-term plan, is making Anakin eventually his apprentice. So Dooku was just a stopgap. Dooku was just a waypoint for Sidious to get to Anakin. So I think because of that, we have to assume that Dooku probably did not have access to certain information that Sidious had, certain knowledge about the dark side of the Force. I have to assume that Sidious withheld information to Dooku that would allow Dooku's strength in the Force to grow and allow him to have a stronger connection to the dark side of the Force. Because that makes sense, right? If my plan is, hey, this homeboy here is just going to be my stopgap apprentice for a very short amount of time, I'm not going to give him my go-to tips and tricks that make me a super strong Sith Lord. I'm going to withhold that stuff because I don't want him to potentially grow too strong that he could possibly overthrow my ass. So I'm going to probably withhold some of my juicier tips and tricks with the dark side from him. I have to assume that that's probably what Palpatine did when he had Dooku as his apprentice. So I definitely think Dooku probably never reached his full potential as a Sith Lord. One of the things, I mean, could you imagine Count Dooku, full potential Sith Lord Count Dooku? I don't know if you could say that he could rival Sidious or Plagueis, but I think it's safe to say that he would have been an extremely powerful Sith Lord. Because again, remember, he was a Jedi Master before he became a Sith. He was already super powerful. And I like to kind of liken the dark side to using performance enhancing drugs. If you're a sports fan, right, using steroids, it's kind of the same sort of thing. It's a fast and easy route to be able to access strength and a connection to the dark side, or the Force, I should say, that's going to allow you to be stronger more quickly, right? So he was already a Jedi Master, and then once he became Sidious's apprentice, his strength probably grew exponentially. And now imagine him as the Sith Master and no one really to challenge him for a little bit of time until his potential apprentice outgrew him in strength and was able to overthrow him. Dooku could be a serious threat, man. A full-powered Count Dooku, Sith Lord Count Dooku, could be an absolute beast. But I love me some Count Dooku questions. I figured, hey, let's start off the Q&A with Dooku, because who doesn't like some Dooku? Slytherin Queen, welcome to the chat. Glad you're joining us. Sonia, welcome to the chat. Glad you are joining us. So Slytherin asks in the chat, do you think if Dooku had stayed long enough and perhaps taken Anakin instead of Obi-Wan, perhaps Palpatine may have had a harder time turning Anakin? So, do you mean trying to persuade Anakin to turn to the dark side? Or do you mean, I'm not sure if you're asking Anakin to become a Sith apprentice to Dooku? Or if you mean Anakin becoming Dooku's Jedi apprentice. I don't, because here's the thing, regardless of who Anakin, let's just go with Anakin as Dooku's Jedi apprentice for a second, right? I still think that regardless of Dooku as Anakin's Jedi Master, you know what? Now I was gonna say that I still think he would have fallen to the dark side, but now I don't know, because my initial thought was, hey, his whole fall to the dark side is primarily due to the loss of the connection to his mother in his life. Then him feeling like he was losing Padme, right? The struggle that he had with both of those, that was what made him descend towards the dark side. And Dave Filoni, I can't remember if it was in like the Mandalorian season 1. It was in like one of the behind the scenes for like making of Star Wars something. It was on a Disney Plus, and he was saying that basically the Duel of the Fates, why that duel is called the Duel of the Fates, is because Qui-Gon and Maul are basically fighting for the fate of the galaxy at that point. Qui-Gon losing basically, to some extent, pretty much set in motion the eventual fall of the Republic and the downfall of the Jedi, because that was going to allow Anakin to eventually fall to the dark side, because at that time Anakin needed more of a father figure in his life, which Qui-Gon could have assumed, as opposed to Obi-Wan, who was more like a brother to Anakin. And that was from Dave Filoni. And so I bring that up because could Dooku be that father figure for Anakin that might have helped him with those struggles? Damn, bro, I don't know. Now I'm kind of torn. Now I'm like, initially I was like, no matter who Anakin's master was, he still would have fallen to the dark side. But now I'm not entirely sure. Dooku could have potentially been someone that could have prevented Anakin's fall to the dark side. The only problem is that we have to remember Dooku also struggled with a lot of, I don't want to say the same sorts of emotions that Anakin struggled with that made Anakin fall to the dark side, but Dooku wanted more. Dooku wanted more power. Dooku, in his pajamas, is a perfect example of it. He enjoyed luxurious pajamas. His pajamas were made from like the finest material, some of the finest material in the galaxy. And I feel like that's a perfect exemplification of Dooku's personality and him as a Sith Lord, right? He wants more. He wants as much power and privilege as he possibly can have. And Tales of the Jedi did a good job of kind of showing Dooku, yeah, we got to see that the corruption of the Senate and the corruption of the Republic helped push him towards leaving the Jedi Order and eventually becoming the Sith Lord. But I do think that he also probably struggled with wanting more power, with wanting more of a role in being able to shape the galaxy as he saw fit. So in that sense, maybe pairing him up with Anakin would have been disastrous. So I could see it either way. But yeah, that's an excellent question, Slytherin. Excellent question. All right, let's move and groove on to our next question, which comes from SmartIX3DT, who asks, because Palpatine returned in The Rise of Skywalker, does that mean Vader's sacrifice was in vain? I see this question come up. I see this come up a lot. And I wanted to answer this because I see this a lot, especially in comments for my videos. I see this all the time. So I figured, hey, you know what? This is a great opportunity to address this question. So because Sidious survives in Return of the Jedi, I see a lot of people say that means that Anakin's redemption is ruined, which to me, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case at all. So give me 1 second. I'm going to probably mess around with the lighting in here because it's at that time of day. My house, like the sun sets right on the damn window of my office. So it gets super bright in here. And then as it gets later, it gets dark. So I'm going to adjust my brightness really quickly. All right. I think that's good. All right. So a lot of people feel that because of Sidious's return in the Rise of Skywalker, that means what Anakin did, his sacrifice, is basically for naught, right? Now, let me preface this by saying I'm not the biggest Rise of Skywalker fan. It's got some decent moments in it, but overall, I'm not the biggest fan of that film. In addition, let's also not forget that Sidious also returned in Legends, right? The inspiration that J.J. Abrams took for Rise of the Skywalker is from a Legends comic called Dark Empire. And that comic sees Sidious return in pretty much a very similar sort of way, okay? And that comic takes place about 10 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. And again, it sees Sidious return in a very similar way to how he does in Rise of Skywalker. I'm not a fan of Dark Empire. I've mentioned that multiple times. I think that comic is kind of booty cheeks. And to be honest, I had to force myself to finish reading it. I just did not like that comic at all. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Anakin's redemption. Now, to me, the point of the throne room scene in Return of the Jedi is to show Anakin's redemption, that father and son have saved one another. The return of the Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, and then the rise of Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. Hence, that's why the film is called Return of the Jedi, right? So during that scene, it's Anakin, not Vader, that tosses Sidious down the reactor shaft and into his presumed death. Sidious surviving, for me, doesn't take away from what Anakin did. It's Luke's love for his father, his insistence that no matter what terrible things Vader had done throughout his life, there was still good in him. And that led to Anakin's redemption. And in addition to that, Vader sees Luke not bending to the Emperor's will or being fully corrupted by the dark side. Because we could see in that scene, one of the moments that I love in that scene is when you could see Luke hiding from Vader, and you see the shot of Luke, it pans to his face, and half of his face is covered in shadow and half of his face is covered in light. I love that. That's supposed to signify he's struggling right there with potentially falling to the dark side and potentially becoming the Emperor's new apprentice and killing his father, but he does not bend. I love that. Right? And so Luke refuses to kill Vader, and because of the love for his father, him not wanting to become a Sith, that's when Anakin returns. Okay, and that love between father and son was strong enough for Anakin to finally return to the light side and then yeet Sidious's ass down that reactor shaft. Whether Sidious survives, for me, is irrelevant in regards to Anakin's redemption, right? What matters is that Luke's love for and his insistence that there was still good in his father, along with his refusal to acquiesce to the Emperor, allowed Anakin to finally do what he had been wanting to do for years. There is multiple moments, maybe not Anakin wanting to return, but there are multiple moments in canon and in Legends where Vader wants to kill the Emperor, but he was not strong enough. And he also didn't have the Bellagio's to also face Sidious, in part because he probably he'd get wrecked, right? So Anakin had decided that he was no longer going to allow himself to be manipulated by Sidious there. He saw a window of opportunity. He took it, and he stopped Vader from killing his son, and in the process, presumably thought he killed Darth Sidious, right? But him saving his son and his son saving him, that is what matters in that scene. So I don't think that Sidious surviving means that Anakin's sacrifice was in vain. And for all intents and purposes, Anakin and Luke stopped the Emperor and they stopped the Empire from winning at Endor, right? That had significant impact on the Galactic Civil War, right? And they set in motion the eventual fall of the Empire roughly a year later in canon, with this when the Galactic Concordance was signed in 5 ABY, right? In Legends, though, it's a little bit different in Legends. So in the Galactic Civil War actually lasts 15 years beyond Return of the Jedi. And in the comic Dark Empire, the Empire is pretty damn strong and puts up a good fight against the New Republic at that point. And in that comic, the war seemed like it had ended when Darth Sidious, he returns, he's revived, and then he's eventually killed. But it even continues on beyond that point with Thrawn and some of his story. Okay, so if we're using the logic that, hey, Sidious's return in the Rise of Skywalker negates and ruins Anakin's sacrifice, in Legends, the Galactic Civil War continued for far longer than in canon, and it didn't even end when Sidious was killed a decade later. So you could make the argument that Anakin's sacrifice achieved nothing. But again, right, Sidious dying for me is irrelevant when we're talking about Anakin's redemption. What matters is that the love for father and son was more powerful than Sidious's manipulation, and father and son saved each other. That's what matters for me. And if we're using the argument that Anakin was the chosen one, which I'm not a fan of the chosen one, but let's, for argument's sake, right, let's say, hey, Anakin was the chosen one. He's supposed to end the Sith. He's supposed to bring balance to the Force. Let's not forget, in Legends, Darth Krayt revived the Sith Order roughly 20 years after Return of the Jedi and created his one Sith, right? So to me, I think the Chosen One prophecy, when Lucas put it together, he did not envision creating, shows and movies beyond the prequels. I think he had some of the basis for the sequel trilogy, but like he was like, maybe it'll get done, maybe it won't be. He didn't envision selling Lucasfilm to Disney, right? So for him, it was, hey, my story is the Skywalker saga. Anakin is the prophesized chosen one. He's going to bring balance to the Force. He's going to end the Sith, right? But in terms of Lucasfilm being owned by Disney, bro, the chosen one prophecy is whack. And even if George Lucas was still in control of Lucasfilm and was still going to be making Star Wars stories, the chosen one prophecy is very limiting for storytelling. So I'm not a fan of the chosen one prophecy. But for me, guys, I feel like what's a bummer is that I rarely, if ever, heard this brought up prior to the Rise of Skywalker. And even though Legends established that Sidious was able to return after Return of the Jedi, and that a new Sith Order arose about 20 years after Return of the Jedi. For me, I think this is just low-hanging fruit that people use to try to shit on Lucasfilm and the sequels. And there's a segment of the fan base that wants to shit on canon no matter what, and automatically say that Legends is superior to canon. And to me, as much as I didn't like it at the time, I actually think that Sidious's return post Return of the Jedi is a prime example of canon actually being better than Legends. I like Sidious's return in canon far more than I did in Legends. I think it's way cooler. At the time when Rise of Skywalker was coming out, and then once it was released, when we find out Sidious returns, I was just like, yo, this is so whack. But since then, there's been some really cool stuff that has been released, giving explanation and giving insight into how Sidious was able to do that, how the Sith Eternal was able to help him live on Exegol and extend his life. I actually kind of dig it now. And so to me, this is one example where I'm going to say, bro, canon, totally cooler than Legends with Sidious's return, right? I talked about this in another Q&A, so you guys can feel free to listen to me blather on about that in one of my other previous Q&As. But yeah, by and large, Rise of Skywalker isn't the best movie, but for me, Sidious's return does not negate Anakin's sacrifice or his redemption. To me, it's, again, Sidious dying is almost secondary to what we're supposed to get from that scene. That was a kind of a long-winded response. Let me brighten my camera up as the sun is setting, and let me check the So Phantom Sidious says, well, he saved his son, so it wasn't in vain. He did redeem himself and return as a Jedi, so it doesn't devalue his sacrifice. Bull Run, honestly, no. Rise of Skywalker is great. Hey, if you like it, that not gonna shame you for enjoying it. There are parts of that movie that absolutely are slam dunks, and then there's parts of that movie that strike out in the worst way for me. I will say I've watched that. I put that movie on from time to time and I'll watch it, or I'll put on specific scenes from that movie that I really, really like. Like I said, the moments that are good, I feel like are really, really good. But for me, the moments that I think aren't the best are not my favorite. But that's all right. Hey, if you like it, all the more power, my friend. All right. So next up, Nolcario asks, what are the most selfless / heroic things Jedi have done? Love this freaking question so much. This is my kind of question. So there's several that immediately come to mind. Obviously, right, we just talked about Anakin's sacrifice to save Luke. So that's an excellent moment. But the first one that popped into my mind, this to me is like one of the most quintessential badass Jedi moments, is Luke's sacrifice in The Last Jedi. I freaking love his sacrifice in The Last Jedi. It is so dope. So, we see the First Order is basically about to obliterate the Resistance. They're on the brink of annihilation at this point. And so Luke, using Force projection, is, in my mind, again, one of the most quintessential acts a Jedi can do. Not only does he not use any violence whatsoever against Kylo Ren, but the technique that he's using is extremely difficult. It's extremely strenuous. This is an extremely rare and hard Force technique for someone to be able to do. And by him doing this, he gives the Resistance enough time to be able to escape the First Order, and in doing so, sacrifices himself. That to me is the most like straight up Jedi shit anyone can do, right? You don't use any violence whatsoever. You sacrifice yourself to save others, and to do so, you use a ballin' ass, extremely rare, extremely difficult Force technique. Like, I seriously love this moment so much. I remember in the theaters when it's revealed that he's a Force projection. Like, I remember when you see Kylo Ren's feet slide and you could see like the dust move. Luke, you could very clearly see that his feet are not causing the like salt or dust to move whatsoever. And I initially like picked up on it and I was like, what the heck? Why is the salt like not moving? And it never dawned on me that, holy crap, he could be a Force projection. So once it's revealed, I literally was like, yo, what the I was like floored by that moment. So dope. So yeah, I absolutely love that moment. It is such an excellent and amazingly heroic thing that a Jedi has done so far that we've seen. Next one that comes to mind, our boy Obi-Wan, his sacrifice in A New Hope. I love this shot so much. Just him, lightsaber up to his face, accepting his fate, sacrificing himself to give Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie enough time so that they could escape the Death Star. I love it. And just I love the banter between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan during this scene. My buddy and I from during high school, we used to just quote lines from this scene constantly. I love this scene so much. And yeah, Obi-Wan's sacrifice to allow Luke and company to be able to get aboard the Millennium Falcon and then escape the Death Star, escape the Empire is just so dope. How could you not love that moment? Especially as a little kid, like watching that, I was like, this is so dope. And I remember being like, wait a second, what the hell just happened to him? Where did he go? He was just there. Why is he all of a sudden, he just disappeared? I love that. And I love that it kind of goes in line with what we were just talking about with Luke. They did something so selfless. They sacrificed themselves for others that they were allowed to essentially like almost purely become one with the Force, which is so dope. It's just an excellent moment. So we cannot not talk about Obi-Wan's sacrifice. We also cannot not talk about Kanan Jarrus. Oh, I kid you not, guys. When I read this question, I was like, I got to go back and I got to watch Kanan's death scene. Bro, I started bawling my eyes out. I can't even tell you how many times I've watched that. I'm like, I know what's going to happen. Bawling my eyes out watching it. Just like, it is incredible. Everything about that moment is incredible. The music, the fact that Hera professes her love to Kanan and they finally kiss and Kanan is floored by it. Like, just talking about it right now is kind of like getting me choked up. It is such an incredible moment. I love it so much. And I love that our boy Grogu did something similar in the finale of Mando season 3 to save himself, Din and Bo-Katan. It's just so awesome. And I definitely think, right, Kanan had to know that he was going to die, right? I think he knew somehow he was going to die. And I think that's why so much time at the beginning of the episode is spent on Kanan and on his meditation and him cutting his hair, because I'm assuming that in some way, shape, or form, the Force made him aware that he was going to die. And he was preparing to sacrifice himself to save the people that he loved. And dude, it is so crushing. And then just seeing as he is just about to die that the Force restores his vision and he gets to see Hera with his eyes one last time. Amazing. I'm like straight up right now trying to hold back tears because it is so incredible. Like, I remember when Danielle and I watched that for the first time, she and I were an absolute wreck. Just like absolutely wrecked us. I'm like literally fighting back tears right now as I'm talking about it because it's just such an incredible scene. I love it so much. And again, just a quintessential Jedi moment. It's spectacular. And while we're talking about our rebel crew, we got to talk about Ezra. Maybe not to the, his sacrifice isn't going to be the same level of Obi-Wan, Luke's, Kanan's sacrifice because they all lost their lives in the process. But I will say for Ezra, he had no clue what his fate was. He didn't know where the Purrgil were going to be taking him and Thrawn, right? He had used the Force to connect with the Purrgil, get them to come to Lothal to help them fight the Empire. And then he knew, hey, to win here, I gotta sacrifice myself so that the Purrgil take Thrawn and I wherever the hell we're going to be taken, right? He doesn't know what's going to happen to him. We know obviously he survives, but still it's an excellent moment. It is still like going back and watching that finale is another one. Guys, Rebels is so damn amazing. I cannot believe that there are people that have not seen Rebels. It is so freaking good. I love Rebels so much. And yeah, Ezra's sacrifice is great. Talk about, man, what a story arc Ezra has. Go watch episode 1 of Rebels and see how Ezra acts in that episode to the finale and the difference in his character. Just absolutely spectacular writing. Oh, love it so much, guys. Rebels is incredible. All right. Last one that I have to mention is my homeboy Stellan Gios from the High Republic. So, my boy Stellan Gios in The Falling Star basically sacrificed himself to pretty much save who knows how many lives, countless lives. What we learn in The Fallen Star is that the Nile basically infiltrate Starlight Beacon, and then they sabotage it. And in doing so, the Starlight Beacon starts falling. Is it Iram or Aranel? I think it's Iram. Starlight Beacon starts falling into Iram, and to save the people below, to save a city from being destroyed below, Stellan Geo sacrifices himself. He stays aboard Starlight Beacon as it's falling apart and crashing into Iram to direct it to fall into the sea. No book has ever made me cry in my life until The Fallen Star. I was reading this book and was like in bed, just crying my eyes out, like trying not to let Danny Girl see me cry. It was as incredible and as heartbreaking as you would imagine. And I love The Fallen Star so much. It's such an incredible book. Claudia Gray is such a fantastic writer. Claudia Gray wrote The Fallen Star. I cannot recommend Fallen Star enough. It is spectacular. Although, shit, if you haven't read it yet, I just spoiled it. So my bad. I probably should have said a spoiler warning before that one. So my bad, guys. But all right. I want to know if there are any... Well, actually, do you agree with these handful of moments that I mentioned? Are there others that I'm not thinking of, or that you think are more badass? Let me know down in the comments, because I would love to know what you guys think are some of the most ballin', like straight up heroic Jedi moments in Star Wars. All right, let me quickly just catch up here. So Slytherin Queen. I'm currently reading the night. Oh, when did it come out? 2010, 2012. Knights of the Old Republic comic series for the first time. I did not read comics for a long period of time, and when I was pretty much only reading Batman comics. So I'm going back and reading Legends comics that I never read, and so now I'm diving into Knights of the Old Republic, and I do like it. I loved SWTOR, Star Wars The Old Republic, but one of my gripes, I have two gripes with The Old Republic. Most recently, thinking about, like, bro, a lot of the qualms that people have with the Jedi from the Clone Wars era, right? Them being a military, and you could kind of say that that's sort of the same thing as in the Old Republic, although in the Old Republic, the Jedi they did not want to get involved with the Mandalorian Wars. But one of the things that I found so weird when reading this comic was that, like, the Jedi during this point did not just basically get children when they're young to join the Jedi. There are Jedi Knights that still are connected to their family and still have contact with their family, which I'm like, man, that's kind of weird. I got to get used to it, but I'm really, really enjoying the Knights of the Old Republic comic series. It's been really fun, really cool. Some of the characters in it have been really cool, and some of the storylines have been very unexpected and very dope. So that's been a ton of fun. As someone that played SWTOR for so long, I'm a big fan of the Old Republic. I read a lot of those Old Republic companion novels, and they're dope. I would love if we get to if Lucasfilm starts to dive into the Old Republic more, because it's a really cool period of time. I would hope that the technology wouldn't be as similar in Legends as it if they were to do that, because basically the technology during the Old Republic in Legends was pretty much the same as during, the Skywalker saga, which I know that's another gripe that people have about the Old Republic. But yeah, Old Republic is dope, man. If you've never played SWTOR, Star Wars The Old Republic, dude, it's free. Go play that game. It is a ton of fun. It is super, super dope. I started playing not too long after it dropped, and then, like I said, I played for almost like a decade. It's a ton of fun. So yeah, that'd be an excellent game for you to play if you like the Old Republic. All right, let's stick with the High Republic. For our last question, Darth Saul asks, How do you think the High Republic ends? Love this question because I love the High Republic, and I have some dang thoughts on how I think the High Republic is going to end. So, whether the High Republic ends with the final novel in Phase 3, which is going to be the last phase of the High Republic. So right now we're currently in Phase 2 of the High Republic. Phase 1 started in 2020. Was it seriously 2020 already? Yeah, it's 2020. Jeez. And it started with the release of Light of the Jedi, and Light of the Jedi takes place in 232 BBY. Phase 2 now is 150 years in the past from Phase 1. So it's taking place roughly 380-ish BBY. And then Phase 3 is supposed to go back to around 230-ish, 200 BBY. And so where we left off in Phase 1, just as I mentioned before, the Nile just obliterated Starlight Beacon. And so where we're going to get into Phase 3, I'm assuming that what we're going to see in Phase 3 is that the Nile do something so terrible, something so awful, that it's going to force the Jedi's hand. They are going to have to do something that goes against their beliefs, that makes them challenge their way of operating and the way that they do things. And I've mentioned this before. What I think we're going to find out is that I think the Sith are currently guiding the Nile behind the scenes. That's what I think. I don't know how they're doing it. Don't know if the Nile even know that they're being controlled or guided by the Sith. But what I could see happening is that Marchion Ro, who's the Eye of the Nile, who's basically controlling the Nile at this point, is working with a Sith Lord, but might not know that he's working with a Sith, and that Sith Lord is helping him and guiding him. That's my thought, is that we're going to find out once we start to get towards the end of Phase 3 of the High Republic, or maybe in the Acolyte, guys, because the Acolyte is going to take place during the waning days of the High Republic. Aussie Star Wars nerd, perfect time for you to join. Welcome, my friend, because Aussie Star Wars nerd in our Discord educated my ass. I thought that the Acolyte was only going to be taking place like 50 years before the Phantom Menace. It's going to be taking place like 100 years-ish before the Phantom Menace. And so it's going to be in the waning days of the High Republic. So we could potentially find out in the Acolyte that, bro, the Sith were responsible for the maneuvers and the machinations that the Nile, the craziness that the Nile were bringing to the Outer Rim. It was because of the Sith. And tell me that would not be sick. Like, part of me is like, crap, if I would absolutely lose my mind if that were to happen. But now I'm like, I don't want to get my hopes up where if that does not happen, I'm bummed about it, because I feel like, how could you not do that? That's like such a great opportunity, because the whole point, and the writers of the High Republic, the authors, it was Claudia Gray, Cavan Scott, Charles Soule, Daniel Jose Older, Justina Ireland. Is there one more that I'm forgetting? I think that's all of them. Basically, they all came together. They spent a bunch of time coming up with the overarching storyline for each phase of the High Republic. So they know how it started. They know how it ends. How could you not be like, bro, this is a perfect opportunity. Let's get the Sith involved. And hey, the Sith were moving and grooving behind the scenes, making the Nile do all these terrible things and forcing the Jedi to basically betray their ideals, right? Because if you think about, so the Sith grand plan, basically the whole reason why the Sith are doing what they do is because of the Sith grand plan. Their plan is, hey, we're gonna operate from the shadows. We're gonna work on corrupting the Republic from within, and we're gonna try to topple the Jedi Order. Well, we've already seen in the High Republic the Nile corrupting senators and getting senators to work with the Nile. Dude, I feel like it is just like almost a slam dunk for Lucasfilm. Like, bro, it could be literally like the final chapter in the final book of the High Republic is from the point of view of this Sith Lord, just basically being like, and so it begins, the fall of the Jedi. How freaking sick would that be? That would be so dope. I would absolutely lose my mind. It would be so sick. And then you could have that Sith Lord appear in the Acolyte. I don't know if the timelines line up for when the final book of Phase 3 of the High Republic drops and then when the Acolyte drops. But man, could you imagine that? Or like imagine if in the High Republic we meet the Sith Lord that's around during the end of Phase 3 of the High Republic, and then we are introduced to this Sith in the Acolyte, and then we get to meet that Sith Lord in a High Republic book. I would lose my mind, guys. I would be like, it's like that meme of Fry from Futurama, like, Lucasfilm, just take my money right now. It just would be so dope. So I think that that's how we are going to find out that the High Republic ends, that the Sith were basically responsible for everything. I think it was dope. I think that would be dope. I know I just started Quest for the Hidden City. Is that what it's called? The novel that young adult novel that George Mann wrote for Phase 2 of the High Republic. I literally just finished Battle Scars last night. And I just started my next High Republic novel. And I love the High Republic so much, guys. Like, I look forward to reading High Republic stuff like you could not believe. So yeah, sign me up for that. I think that is how we're going to find out the High Republic ends. And I think that would be so dope. But what do you guys think? How do you think the High Republic is going to end? Do you think we're going to find out that the Sith were responsible for what the Nihil are doing in the Outer Rim? Let me know down in the comments. Let me know, was there any responses to these questions that you agreed with? Was there anything you were like, this guy's a knucklehead, this guy's ridiculous, this guy's a jabroni? Let me know down in the comments, because I love hearing from you guys. I love having a conversation. Shout out to Aussie Star Wars nerd. As I mentioned before, Star Wars Transmission has a Discord. I don't have the link off the top of my head. I should probably save this and frickin' put the link in the chat. But yeah, we have a Discord server, so join the Discord server. I love having Star Wars conversations with other Star Wars nerds. So let's keep the dang chat going, guys. But with that said, that is all the time we have for the Q&A today. Before I head out, though, I want to just see, were there any last questions that I missed? I don't think so. It is hot as Satan's ballsack in my office. So I'm going to go and cool down for a little bit. I'm going to go and hang out with Danny Girl, go and cool off a little and enjoy the fact that it's finally summer where I live, and I am loving that, even though it is pretty damn warm in my house. But with that said, you guys, now is an excellent time to like this video, subscribe to Star Wars Transmissions if you have not already. We've got shorts that drop on the regular. I've got to get back into doing some Jedi Survivor streams. I've been super busy the last week and a half, 2 weeks. I have not been able to do any Survivor streams. So I've been jonesing to play Survivor, because I've had multiple freaking spoilers that I've come across recently where I'm like, and I've been holding off playing because I wanted to stream. I was like, I gotta play Survivor. I can't keep getting stuff spoiled. So I was playing Survivor before the stream today. So I'm probably gonna play a little bit more before I call it a night. But with that said, you guys, thanks for watching. May the Force be with you, and stay nerdy.